My name is Yvette. I'm 34 years old, and yesterday morning, my boss walked into the parking garage and froze when he saw me stepping out of a brand new Mercedes S-Class. His face transformed from confusion to pure rage. In seconds, his jaw clenching as he stared at the silver luxury sedan gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I'd been keeping something major from everyone at work, and in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. Before I tell you how I went from his target to his worst nightmare in just 24 hours, let me know where you're watching from today. And if you've ever had a boss who underestimated you, hit that subscribe button because this story is going to resonate with you. Trust me, what happens next will show you why sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to hide your success any longer. Every morning for the past 3 years, I've woken up at 5:30 in my modest one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Denver. The place is nice enough, clean and functional, exactly what everyone at Morrison Industries expects from a mid-level analyst making $62,000 a year. My co-workers have been there for occasional gatherings, they've seen the second-hand furniture and the 10-year-old Honda Civic in my designated parking spot. What they haven't seen is the penthouse downtown that I purchased 6 months ago, or the fact that the Civic was just a prop in a much larger game. 3 years ago, I walked into Morrison Industries with my fresh MBA from the University of Colorado, full of ambition and naive optimism. The company was everything I'd dreamed of working for a major player in international logistics, with offices across 30 countries. During my interview, they promised growth opportunities, mentorship programs, and a clear path to senior management. What they didn't mention was Marcus Whitman. Marcus became my direct supervisor 2 weeks after I started. He was 47 with perfectly styled salt and pepper hair and custom Italian suits that he made sure everyone knew cost more than most people's monthly rent. From day one, he made it clear that he viewed female employees as decorative accessories rather than valuable team members. His management style consisted of taking credit for our successes and blaming us for his failures. I still remember my first presentation to the board. I'd spent 3 weeks analyzing supply chain inefficiencies and identified solutions that could save the company $2 million annually. Marcus reviewed my work, told me it was amateur hour, then presented my exact findings to the board the next day as his own breakthrough innovation. When I confronted him privately, he laughed and said I should be grateful for the learning experience. The belittling comments were constant. During team meetings, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to explain what I really meant. He'd assign me coffee runs during crucial strategy sessions. Once, when a major client complimented my analysis, Marcus quickly interjected that I had simply followed his detailed instructions. The worst part was how calculated it all was. He was too smart to leave evidence too careful to cross lines that HR could act on. 2 years ago, something shifted inside me. Instead of going home and crying into a glass of wine, I started going home and building something. Every night from 6 to midnight, every weekend, every vacation day, I worked on creating my own consulting firm. I called it Apex Strategic Solutions, and I focused on helping Asian companies navigate American markets, leveraging the Mandarin I'd studied since college, and the connections I'd carefully cultivated at international trade conferences. The breakthrough came 8 months ago. Through a contact I'd made at a conference, Marcus had deemed not important enough for him to attend. I connected with a group of Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturers looking to establish distribution channels in North America. They needed someone who understood both cultures, both markets, and both languages. The contract negotiation took 4 months of secret flights to Taipei on weekends, video calls at 3 a.m, and more caffeine than any human should consume. 2 weeks ago, they signed an $8 million contract with Apex Strategic Solutions. The Mercedes S-Class was my gift to myself. Not just a car, but a symbol that I'd survived Marcus Whitman's psychological warfare and built something he could never take credit for. The dealer delivered it to my penthouse on Saturday morning, and I spent the weekend debating whether to drive it to work. What tipped the scales was discovering that my non-compete clause expired in exactly 2 weeks. I'd been counting down the days for 6 months planning my exit strategy with the precision of a military operation. But I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending to be less than I was tired of letting Marcus believe he'd broken me. The toxic culture Marcus had created at Morrison Industries went far beyond his treatment of me. He had a rotation of victims, usually young women or minorities, anyone he perceived as threatening to his carefully constructed kingdom. Sarah from accounting had quit after he publicly humiliated her for suggesting a more efficient expense tracking system. James from IT had transferred departments after Marcus accused him of incompetence for failing to illegally hack a competitor's database. Those of us who remained had developed survival strategies. We communicated through encrypted messages documenting everything building cases we hoped might someday matter. Patricia from HR knew something was wrong. You could see it in her eyes during mandatory culture surveys. But Marcus had been there for 15 years and brought in major accounts. He seemed untouchable. Sunday night, I made my decision. Monday morning, I would drive my Mercedes to work. Not to show off, but to stop hiding. The universe seemed to agree because that morning the sunrise was spectacular, painting the Denver skyline in shades of gold and amber as I slipped behind the wheel of my S-Class. The leather seats still had that new car smell, and the engine purred like a satisfied cat as I navigated through morning traffic. My phone connected automatically to the premium sound system, and I couldn't help but smile at the irony of listening to a podcast about workplace empowerment while driving to face my worst workplace nightmare. The security guard at Morrison Industries, Tom had worked there for 12 years. He'd seen me arrive every morning in my old Civic, always with a cheerful wave, and occasionally with an extra coffee for him on cold mornings. When I pulled up in the Mercedes, he did a double take so dramatic he nearly dropped his clipboard. I lowered the window and gave him my usual smile, watching his confusion transform into curiosity. Word travels fast in a corporate building. By the time I'd parked in my usual spot and walked through the lobby, I could feel the stares and hear the whispers. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt longer than usual, probably because 3 different colleagues suddenly forgot how to make casual conversation when they saw my car keys with the Mercedes logo clearly visible. Marcus's morning routine was as predictable as it was pompous. He arrived at exactly 8:15, made a show of greeting the receptionist loud enough for everyone to hear, then walked through the open office area like a king surveying his domain. He never acknowledged me directly, preferring to communicate through passive-aggressive emails or by talking about me in third person, even when I was sitting right there. This morning started no differently. I was at my desk reviewing contracts when I heard his voice booming across the floor. But then something changed. The talking stopped abruptly, replaced by rapid footsteps, heading toward the windows that overlooked the parking garage. I knew the exact moment he spotted my car. His reflection in my computer monitor showed him frozen at the window, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. He stood there for 30 seconds, maybe longer, before turning slowly toward my desk. His approach reminded me of a predator stalking prey, except he had no idea who was actually hunting whom. His face was a masterclass in emotional transition, cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally settling on a rage that turned his carefully Botoxed forehead an alarming shade of red. The first words out of his mouth were exactly what I'd expected. Not a good morning, not a professional inquiry, just pure condescension dripping from every syllable. He asked if I was having car trouble and had borrowed Mummy's car for the day. The small audience of early arrivals pretended to work while obviously listening to every word. I kept my voice steady and professional, informing him that the car was mine, purchased with my own money and fully paid for. The disbelief on his face was almost comical. He actually laughed that harsh bark he used when he thought someone had said something particularly stupid. Then came the accusations, rapid fire and increasingly desperate. Was I dating someone rich? Had I inherited money? Was I involved in something illegal? Each question got louder, drawing more attention from arriving colleagues. Marcus had never been good at controlling his temper when his worldview was challenged, and the sight of me, his favorite target owning something he couldn't afford on his salary, was shattering his reality. He demanded I explain myself right there in the middle of the office. When I remained calm and simply repeated that it was my personal vehicle purchased legally, with my own funds, he escalated to threats. He would launch an investigation. He would check every transaction, every client interaction, every expense report I'd ever filed. He would find out what I was hiding, because there was no way someone like me could afford something like that. The someone like me part hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone heard it. Everyone understood exactly what he meant. And everyone saw me refuse to take the bait. Instead, I suggested that if he had concerns about my conduct, we should discuss them with HR present. That's when his face went from red to purple. He called Patricia immediately, demanding she come to the office right away for an emergency meeting. While we waited, he made a show of calling security to watch my car, loudly proclaiming that it was probably stolen or leased under fraudulent pretenses. More employees arrived, walking into what felt like a crime scene. Marcus had positioned himself between my desk and the elevator, ensuring everyone had to pass by his theatrical display of outrage. He started polling people, asking if they'd ever seen me with expensive things before, if I'd been acting suspicious, if anyone had noticed unusual behavior. Jennifer from marketing tried to deflect, mentioning that personal finances weren't company business, but Marcus shut her down immediately. He declared that potential fraud was everyone's business and that protecting the company's reputation was paramount. The irony of Marcus Whitman lecturing about reputation would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. When Patricia finally arrived, she looked tired. It was 8:45 on a Monday morning and she was already dealing with Marcus in full meltdown mode. She suggested we move to a conference room, but Marcus refused. He wanted witnesses, he said. He wanted everyone to see what happened when someone betrayed the company's trust. That's when he made his biggest mistake. In front of 43 employees, 2 security guards, and Patricia from HR, Marcus looked directly at me and said the quiet part out loud. He said women like me, people who came from nothing, who should be grateful for any opportunity, didn't deserve luxury cars. We didn't deserve success beyond what men like him decided to give us. Patricia's face went pale. Someone gasped. 3 people pulled out their phones and started recording, and I smiled because Marcus Whitman had just handed me everything I needed on a silver platter. The HR conference room on the 12th floor had always felt cold, with its grey walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sick. Patricia sat across from me, her expression professional but concerned, while Marcus paced behind her like a caged animal. The door was closed, but I could see curious faces passing by the glass walls, trying to glimpse the drama unfolding inside. Patricia started with the standard protocol stating the date and time for the recording, listing all parties present. Her voice was steady, but I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she organized her papers. She'd been with the company for 8 years and had probably never dealt with a situation quite like this. Marcus couldn't wait for formalities. He launched into a tirade about fiduciary responsibility and corporate ethics, throwing around legal terms he'd clearly Googled on his phone during the walk to HR. His accusations came in waves, each more desperate than the last. First, I was embezzling from client accounts. Then I was selling company secrets to competitors. By the time he got to suggesting I was running an escort service for wealthy clients, Patricia had to intervene. She pulled up my employment records on her laptop, her fingers clicking across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. My annual reviews appeared on the screen, all of them showing meets or exceeds expectations, though notably never the highest rating, despite my consistently superior performance metrics. Marcus had always made sure of that. When Patricia displayed my salary history, Marcus's smugness returned. He pointed at the screen, triumphantly noting that my $62,000 salary couldn't possibly support a $300,000 vehicle. He'd done the math, he said. Even if I saved every penny for 5 years eating nothing but ramen, I couldn't afford that car. His voice grew louder as he demanded to know where the money came from. Patricia turned to me, her expression carefully neutral, and asked if I could explain the source of funds for the vehicle. I could see her hoping I had a reasonable explanation, something that would diffuse the situation. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd been carrying for 6 months, waiting for this moment. Inside were the incorporation documents for Apex Strategic Solutions, registered in Delaware 2 years ago. My business license, my federal EIN, bank statements showing legitimate wire transfers from international clients, and most importantly, a letter from Morrison Industries' legal department from when I'd started confirming that consulting work in non-competing sectors didn't violate my employment agreement. Marcus grabbed the papers before Patricia could properly review them, his eyes scanning frantically for something, anything he could use against me. When he reached the bank statements, his face went white. The numbers were undeniable. Apex Strategic Solutions had generated $12 million in revenue over 2 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia carefully took the documents from Marcus's shaking hands and reviewed them methodically. She cross-referenced dates with my employment timeline, checked the client names against Morrison's competitor list, and finally looked up at Marcus with an expression I'd never seen before. It was disappointment mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. Marcus tried to recover, pivoting to claim I'd used company time and resources for personal business, but I'd been prepared for that too. I showed Patricia my detailed time logs, every hour, accounted for every vacation day, properly filed every sick day, legitimate. I'd worked on Apex exclusively during personal hours, and I had the documentation to prove it. That's when Marcus made his second crucial error. He accused me of stealing clients, specifically mentioning the Taiwanese Semiconductor Group. He said I'd met them at a company conference and diverted them for personal gain. Patricia asked him to clarify which conference, and he confidently stated it was the Asian Trade Summit in San Francisco last year. I pulled out my phone and showed Patricia an email thread. Marcus had denied my request to attend that conference, stating it wasn't valuable enough to justify the expense. I'd gone on my own time, paying my own way, using vacation days. The email where he called the conference a waste of time for someone at my level was particularly damning. Patricia's typing got faster, documenting everything. She asked Marcus if he had any evidence of actual wrongdoing, any proof of misuse of company resources, or violation of company policy. He sputtered about ethics and loyalty, about team players and knowing your place. Every word dug his hole deeper. Then he played what he thought was his ace. He announced that my non-compete agreement prevented me from any consulting work, and violation was grounds for immediate termination and legal action. The triumph in his voice was nauseating. Patricia pulled up my employment file and found the non-compete clause. She read it carefully, then read it again. Her voice was measured as she explained that the non-compete specifically referenced direct competition with Morrison Industries' core business of logistics and supply chain management. Apex Strategic Solutions provided cultural consulting and market entry strategies, completely different services. Furthermore, she noted the non-compete expired after 2 years of employment. I'd been with the company for 3 years. It had been invalid for an entire year. Marcus's face cycled through emotions like a broken television. He demanded to know why he hadn't been informed, why no one had told him the non-compete had expired. Patricia reminded him that as my direct supervisor, tracking such things was his responsibility. The desperation in his voice turned ugly. He said if he couldn't fire me for this, he'd make my remaining time at Morrison unbearable. He'd assign me impossible projects, give me failing reviews, ensure I never worked in this industry again. He said it all right there in front of Patricia on the recorded HR meeting. Patricia stopped typing. She looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and disgust. She asked him if he was threatening retaliation against an employee who had broken no rules. Marcus, too far gone to recognize the trap, confirmed that he would use every resource at his disposal to destroy my career. That's when I placed my phone on the table and pressed play. The recording started with Marcus's voice from 13 months ago after Morrison Industries had lost a major contract to a competitor. His words filled the conference room with crystal clarity thanks to my phone's surprisingly good microphone. He was instructing me to alter the quarterly reports for the board, to hide the loss by redistributing the numbers across different departments. When my recorded voice protested that this would be fraud, his response was chilling. He said if I didn't do it, he'd not only fire me, but ensure I never worked in finance again. Patricia's face had gone from pale to ashen. She reached for the phone, but I pulled it back gently and swiped to the next recording. This one was from 8 months ago, Marcus making explicit comments about my body during what was supposed to be a performance review. Then another, from 6 months ago, him describing in graphic detail what he thought I must be doing to afford my apartment. I had 47 recordings in total, each one time-stamped and geotagged. Colorado was a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning as long as I was part of the conversation, the recordings were legal. I'd consulted with a lawyer to make sure. The folder I produced next contained 18 months of meticulously documented harassment. Emails where Marcus had excluded me from important meetings because he needed serious people in the room. Messages where he'd assigned me administrative tasks far below my position while giving my analytical work to male colleagues. Screenshots of the company chat where he'd made jokes about emotional females after I'd presented data contradicting his assumptions. But the crown jewel was the witness statements. Sarah, who'd quit 6 months ago, had provided a signed affidavit about Marcus's behavior. James from IT, now safely in another department, had documented Marcus's attempts to make him access competitor systems illegally. Jennifer from marketing, who was still with the company, had written a detailed account of watching Marcus take credit for my work repeatedly. Patricia was typing frantically now, her professional composure cracking. She asked Marcus if he had any response to these allegations. His initial attempt at denial crumbled quickly when I mentioned that 3 current employees were prepared to corroborate everything, and that my attorney had already filed whistleblower protection paperwork with the Department of Labor. The mention of an attorney changed everything. Patricia immediately called legal, putting them on speaker. The company lawyer, David Hernandez, listened to a brief summary and then asked one question that made Marcus's knees visibly buckle. He asked if there was any documentation of Marcus asking employees to falsify financial records. I slid another paper across the table. It was the email Marcus had sent after our conversation about altering the quarterly reports, the one where he'd put in writing that the numbers needed to be adjusted to reflect better performance. He'd been careful with his language, but combined with the recording, his intent was clear. That's when I revealed the connection nobody had seen coming. Gregory Hansen, Morrison Industries' newest board member and largest individual shareholder, was one of Apex Strategic Solutions' clients. Not for anything related to Morrison, but for his personal investments in Asian markets. He'd been so impressed with my work that he'd asked why I was wasting my talent at a company that clearly didn't value it. Marcus tried to salvage anything. He accused me of orchestrating everything, of entrapping him, of planning this whole scenario. Patricia stopped him mid-rant and asked a simple question. Even if I had planned everything, had he or had he not done and said all the things in the recordings? His silence was all the answer anyone needed. Patricia called an emergency board meeting for 11 o'clock. She instructed Marcus to return to his office and touch nothing, speak to no one. Security would escort him. She asked me to remain available, but said I was free to return to my desk if I wanted. As Marcus stood to leave, his final attempt at intimidation was pathetic. He leaned over the table and whispered that this wasn't over, that people like me didn't win against people like him. Patricia heard every word and added it to her report. The next 2 hours passed in a surreal blur. The entire office knew something major was happening. Marcus's office blinds were drawn, but everyone could see the security guard posted outside. People kept walking by my desk, some offering subtle thumbs up, others just trying to gauge my expression. At 10:45, Patricia returned and asked me to come to the boardroom. Marcus was already there, sitting at the far end of the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. 5 board members were on the video screen, and Gregory Hansen was there in person, his expression unreadable. The boardroom at Morrison Industries occupied the entire southeast corner of the 15th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains. I'd only been inside twice before, both times as Marcus's silent assistant, carrying his presentation materials. Now I sat at the polished mahogany table as a key witness to what would become the most dramatic board meeting in company history. Gregory Hansen opened the session with calm authority. At 71, he'd built and sold 3 companies, earning a reputation for surgical precision in cutting out corporate cancer. His presence in person rather than on video told everyone this was serious. The other board members, their faces arranged in a grid on the large screen, looked equally grave. Patricia presented first, her voice steady as she walked through the morning's events chronologically. When she reached the recordings, she played 3 of them for the board. The room fell silent except for Marcus's heavy breathing and the occasional sharp intake of breath from the video feed when particularly damaging statements were heard. Gregory asked for the floor and stood up, his silver hair catching the morning light. He disclosed his business relationship with me through Apex Strategic Solutions, emphasizing that it was completely separate from Morrison Industries and that I'd actually refused his initial suggestion to leave Morrison and consult full-time. He praised my integrity and then dropped a bombshell that even I hadn't seen coming. 3 other board members had independently received complaints about Marcus over the past 2 years. Each time, the complaints had been buried in middle management, never reaching the full board. Gregory had only discovered this after making inquiries following his conversation with me 2 months ago. He'd hired an external investigator who'd found a pattern of protection around Marcus that suggested something more than just poor management. David Hernandez from legal presented next. The IT department had spent the morning conducting an emergency audit of Marcus's activities. What they'd found was staggering. Over 5 years, Marcus had submitted expense reports totaling over $400,000 for client entertainment that couldn't be verified. Trips to Las Vegas written off as client meetings when the clients confirmed they'd never met him there. Dinner receipts for restaurants in cities he'd never travelled to for business. But the worst part was the discovery of a shadow consulting arrangement Marcus had with 2 of Morrison's vendors. He'd been receiving kickbacks for ensuring their contracts were renewed regardless of performance. The payments had gone to an LLC registered in his wife's maiden name, totaling another $200,000. The chief financial officer, appearing virtually from New York, was visibly shaking with rage as she described how this could have destroyed their upcoming SEC filing. If this had come out during an external audit, the entire C-suite could have faced federal investigation. Marcus tried to defend himself, his voice cracking as he claimed the expenses were all legitimate networking, that the LLC was for unrelated real estate investments. But when pressed for documentation, he had nothing. His elaborate house of cards was collapsing in real time. Then it was my turn to speak. I kept it simple and factual, walking through 3 years of systematic harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. I showed them the productivity metrics I'd achieved despite Marcus's interference, the clients I'd brought in while being excluded from strategy meetings, the innovations I'd proposed that Marcus had dismissed publicly, only to implement them later as his own ideas. Jennifer from marketing had asked to address the board and was brought in. Her hands shook as she described watching Marcus humiliate me repeatedly and her guilt over not speaking up sooner. She revealed that 6 other employees had similar stories, but were too frightened to come forward until now. 2 more employees were brought in, each adding their testimony to the growing mountain of evidence against Marcus. By the time they finished, the pattern was undeniable. Marcus had created a toxic environment that had cost Morrison Industries at least $12 million in turnover, lost productivity, and settled lawsuits that had been kept quiet. The head of human resources for the entire company, Patricia's boss, appeared on screen from the Chicago office. She announced that based on preliminary investigations, Morrison Industries was looking at potential lawsuits from at least 7 former employees who'd left because of Marcus. The legal liability could reach into the tens of millions. The board called for a recess, asking everyone except Marcus and the board members to leave. We waited in Patricia's office, the tension palpable. Jennifer was crying partly from relief and partly from years of suppressed frustration. The security guard who'd been watching Marcus reported that 3 more employees had approached him wanting to file complaints. After 40 minutes, we were called back. The board's decision was unanimous. Marcus Whitman was terminated immediately for cause, forfeiting all severance and unvested stock options. The criminal forensics team would be given full access to his records, and the company would cooperate fully with any resulting investigations. But they weren't done. The board president announced a comprehensive review of all senior management with external investigators brought in to ensure no other Marcus Whitmans were hiding in the organization. They also announced the creation of a new anonymous reporting system that would bypass local management entirely. Then Gregory Hansen turned to me. On behalf of the board, he apologized for what I'd endured. He said my courage in documenting and finally exposing Marcus had potentially saved the company from disaster. He offered me Marcus's position immediately with a salary of $400,000 and a signing bonus to compensate for the years of suppressed advancement. I thanked them, but declined. I explained that Apex Strategic Solutions had just secured 3 more major contracts, and I was passionate about building my own company. The surprise on their faces was almost comical, as if they couldn't imagine anyone turning down such an offer. Instead, I proposed a compromise. I would stay for my remaining 2 weeks to ensure a smooth transition and help train Marcus's replacement. Additionally, Apex Strategic Solutions would provide consulting services during the restructuring at a significantly discounted rate, my way of helping the employees who'd suffered under Marcus. The board accepted immediately. As the meeting concluded, Marcus was escorted out by security. His final walk through the office was witnessed by everyone. The man who'd strutted through these halls like an emperor was reduced to carrying a single box of personal items, his face a mask of defeat and rage. He couldn't resist one last attempt at having the final word. As he passed my desk, he stopped and hissed that I'd regret this, that he had connections, that my little company would never succeed without the protection of a real corporation. Security quickly moved him along, but everyone heard his threats. The transformation in the office was immediate. People who'd been silent for years suddenly felt free to speak. The atmosphere changed from oppressive to cautiously optimistic in the span of an afternoon. Patricia spent the rest of the day taking statements from employees who finally felt safe coming forward. The next 2 weeks at Morrison Industries were unlike anything I'd experienced in 3 years there. Without Marcus's oppressive presence, the department transformed. People actually smiled during meetings. Ideas flowed freely without fear of humiliation. Productivity increased by 30% in just 10 days, a statistic that made the board take notice. I spent my time documenting everything I knew about ongoing projects, creating detailed transition documents that would help whoever took over. The board hired an external candidate for Marcus's position, a woman named Director Angela Foster, who had a reputation for rehabilitating toxic corporate cultures. When she arrived for her initial assessment, she spent 3 hours with me, taking notes on everything from client relationships to which employees had untapped potential. The investigation into Marcus expanded daily. Forensic accountants discovered he'd been siphoning money for 7 years, not 5. 2 vendors came forward admitting to the kickback scheme, hoping for leniency in exchange for cooperation. The FBI opened a formal investigation into wire fraud and tax evasion. Marcus's assets were frozen, including his precious Italian suits and the Porsche he'd loved to park prominently. But the real vindication came from my colleagues. Sarah, who'd quit because of Marcus, called me crying with relief. She'd thought she was alone, that perhaps she'd been too sensitive or had somehow invited his behaviour. 3 former employees reached out saying my actions had given them the courage to speak up at their new companies about similar situations. On my final day, the department threw a goodbye party that was really a freedom celebration. Patricia presented me with a gift from the entire HR department, a crystal paperweight engraved with the date that Marcus was fired, which they'd apparently designated an unofficial company holiday. Angela Foster announced that she was implementing the Yvette Protocol, a new system for protecting employees who report harassment and discrimination. The Mercedes that had started everything became something of a legend in the office. Tom, the security guard, told me people would sometimes walk by it in the parking garage, seeing it as a symbol that the system could be beaten, that truth could prevail over power. I left the car there each day as a reminder that success couldn't be hidden forever. My consulting firm exploded in ways I hadn't anticipated. The story of what happened at Morrison Industries spread through the business community. Instead of being blackballed as Marcus had threatened, I was celebrated. Companies wanted to work with someone who had integrity, who'd built a successful business while enduring harassment, who'd stood up to corruption even when it seemed impossible. Within a month of leaving Morrison, Apex Strategic Solutions had signed contracts worth $23 million. I hired 5 employees, 3 of whom were women who'd left corporate positions due to harassment. We created a company culture based on respect, transparency, and merit. No one ever had to lie about their car or hide their success. Marcus's fall was swift and complete. The criminal charges resulted in a federal indictment. His wife divorced him after learning about the LLC in her name and the legal liability he'd exposed her to. His country club revoked his membership when the scandal made the business journals. The professional network he'd thought would protect him distanced themselves immediately, not wanting to be associated with someone under FBI investigation. I learnt through Gregory Hansen that Marcus had tried to sue me for defamation and corporate espionage. His lawyer dropped the case after reviewing the evidence, actually apologizing to my attorney for wasting everyone's time. Marcus then tried to represent himself, filing rambling complaints that were dismissed immediately. 6 months later, I received a call from Angela Foster. Morrison Industries had completed their cultural transformation and wanted to celebrate. They were hosting a conference on corporate integrity and wanted me to be the keynote speaker. I accepted arriving at the venue in my Mercedes, no longer a symbol of hidden success, but of earned triumph. The speech I gave wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about the thousands of employees who suffer in silence, who hide their talents to avoid becoming targets, who leave industries they love because of toxic managers. I announced that Apex Strategic Solutions was creating a pro bono division to help employees document and report harassment, providing them with the legal resources and support I'd had to figure out alone. The response was overwhelming. Within days, we received hundreds of requests for help. Major corporations reached out wanting to partner with us to clean up their own cultures before they ended up with their own Marcus situations. What had started as my personal survival strategy had become a movement. The Mercedes, that beautiful silver S-Class that had triggered everything, became my daily reminder that authenticity requires courage. Every morning when I walked to it from my penthouse, I remembered the morning Marcus saw it and his world began to crumble. But more importantly, I remembered the moment I decided to stop hiding who I was becoming. A year after leaving Morrison, I was invited to speak at my MBA alma mater. In the audience was a young woman who approached me afterward and tears in her eyes. She was dealing with her own Marcus feeling trapped and worthless. She said seeing what I'd accomplished gave her hope. I gave her my card and told her what someone should have told me 3 years ago, that her success wasn't dependent on her tormentor's permission. That young woman now works for Apex Strategic Solutions. She drives a Tesla Model S that she bought with her signing bonus. She parks it proudly in our company lot where no one questions whether she deserves it. Her former Marcus is under investigation for embezzlement, a pattern we helped her document and report. The morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office at Apex Strategic Solutions headquarters. It's been 18 months since that pivotal Monday when Marcus Whitman discovered my Mercedes, and the ripple effects continue to spread in ways I never imagined. From this vantage point, 30 floors above Denver, I can see the Morrison Industries building in the distance, a daily reminder of where this journey began. The healing process wasn't immediate or easy. For months after leaving Morrison, I'd wake up at 3 a.m, anxiety flooding my system, convinced I'd dreamed the whole thing and would have to face Marcus at work. Therapy helped me understand that 3 years of psychological abuse doesn't disappear overnight, even after justice is served. Dr. Martinez, a specialist in workplace trauma, helped me recognize that my success hadn't erased the wounds, it had just given me better tools to heal them. The most profound healing came from helping others. We've now assisted 47 employees in documenting and reporting workplace harassment. 32 cases have resulted in terminations of abusive managers. 15 have led to complete corporate restructuring. Every victory helps repair a piece of what Marcus tried to break in me. Marcus's criminal trial began 6 months ago. I testified for 4 hours, calmly recounting the financial fraud and systematic harassment. His defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive employee who'd orchestrated his downfall, but the evidence was overwhelming. 22 witnesses testified against him. The forensic accounting revealed nearly $1 million in theft and fraud. Last month, he was convicted on 14 counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to Morrison Industries. The day of his sentencing, I felt no joy, just a quiet sense of closure. Marcus had built his entire identity on power over others, and now he'd lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, his wealth, his family. His ex-wife sent me a letter thanking me for exposing who he really was, saying it helped her understand years of emotional manipulation she'd endured. Morrison Industries has become a case study in corporate transformation. Angela Foster has won 3 industry awards for her culture rehabilitation program. They've promoted 12 women to senior positions and implemented pay equity reviews that resulted in an average 20% raise for female employees. Their stock price has increased by 40%, proving that ethical management is good business. The Yvette Protocol has been adopted by 70 companies nationwide. It ensures that harassment complaints bypass immediate supervisors and go directly to independent review boards. More importantly, it protects complainants from retaliation and provides them with legal resources. Jennifer from marketing, who now heads Morrison's diversity and inclusion program, tells me they haven't had a single harassment case reach crisis level since implementing it. My own company has grown beyond my wildest dreams. Apex Strategic Solutions now employs 32 people with offices in Denver, San Francisco, and Taipei. Our revenue last year was $57 million. We've helped 23 Asian companies successfully enter American markets and 15 American companies expand into Asia. But I'm most proud of our Workplace Justice Division, which operates at cost to help employees fight back against toxic management. 5 of my employees are refugees from toxic workplaces. Sarah, who Marcus drove out of Morrison Industries, is now our Chief Operating Officer. She told me last week that working here has restored her faith in what corporate culture can be. We have a wall in our office with photos and thank you letters from people we've helped escape their own Marcus Whitmans. It reminds us daily why we do this work. The Mercedes S-Class still sits in my private parking space, now joined by a small fleet of cars belonging to my successful team. But it remains special to me not as a status symbol, but as a monument to the moment I chose courage over comfort. Sometimes young professionals ask me if the car was worth all the drama it caused. I tell them the car was never the point. It was about refusing to make myself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. I've started a scholarship fund at my alma mater for first-generation college students entering MBA programs. It's called the Breaking Ceilings Scholarship, and it specifically supports students who've overcome workplace discrimination. This year's recipient is a young man who was told by his manager that people like him didn't belong in finance. He'll graduate next year and already has an offer from Apex Strategic Solutions. The ripple effects continue. Last month, a Fortune 500 CEO called me personally. She'd heard about our work and discovered she had 3 departments with Marcus-like managers. She hired us to conduct a full cultural audit. We found systematic discrimination that had been hidden for years. The cleanup is ongoing, but she's committed to real change, not just cosmetic fixes. People often ask if I regret not taking Marcus's position at Morrison Industries. The $400,000 salary and corporate prestige were tempting. But building something from nothing, creating a company where no one has to hide their success or endure abuse, has been infinitely more rewarding. My employees don't work in fear. They don't hide their achievements. They drive whatever cars they can afford and park them proudly. The most unexpected outcome has been the mentorship network that's developed. I now mentor 12 women navigating toxic workplaces. We meet monthly, sharing strategies and support. 3 have successfully prosecuted harassers. 5 have started their own businesses. 4 have broken through glass ceilings that seemed impenetrable. Their successes heal parts of me I didn't know were still broken. Marcus tried to reach out once from prison, sending a letter through his attorney. He wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow make me understand his perspective. I had my lawyer respond with a simple message that I had nothing to say to him. Some bridges once burned should stay ash. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation with someone who spent years trying to destroy you. The deep lesson I've learned isn't about revenge or even justice. It's about the courage to be visible in a world that often demands we shrink. Every morning, I choose not to hide my success, my intelligence, or my ambition. That choice, repeated daily, has become my freedom. The luxury car that changed my life was never about the Mercedes itself. It was about finally refusing to park my worth in the shadows. Success, I've learned, isn't about reaching a point where the Marcus Whitmans of the world can't hurt you. They'll always exist in boardrooms and break rooms, feeding on others' insecurity. Success is about building something they can't tear down, surrounded by people who see your worth not as a threat, but as an inspiration. It's about creating spaces where the next generation doesn't have to hide their light under branded bushels of false humility. My story has been featured in business journals and leadership conferences, but I'm most proud of the quiet victories. The email from a woman in Ohio who stood up to her harasser after reading about my experience. The young analyst in New York who documented 18 months of discrimination and got justice. The manager in Seattle who recognized his own toxic behavior and sought help to change. These individual transformations matter more than any corporate accolade. Every morning now, I drive whatever car I want. To my own office, where respect isn't requested but required. The journey that started with one decision to stop hiding has become a path others follow toward their own freedom. And that transformation began the moment I decided my boss's opinion of me mattered less than my truth. People sometimes say I'm lucky that everything worked out, that justice was served, that my business succeeded. But luck had nothing to do with it. I spent 2 years documenting every slight building my company in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal my truth. When that moment came triggered by something as simple as driving my own car to work, I was ready. The Mercedes didn't change my life. Courage did. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in my story, know that your Marcus Whitman doesn't define your worth. Document everything. Build your escape route. And when the moment comes, don't hide your success. Drive that car, wear that suit, own that achievement. The people who truly matter will celebrate with you. The ones who don't were never your people anyway. To those who've reached out sharing your own stories of triumph over workplace tyrants, thank you. Your courage feeds mine. We're building a movement where success doesn't require suffering and silence, where achievement isn't apologized for, where the car you drive to work is nobody's business but your own. What would you do if you knew your worth couldn't be questioned? How would you show up if hiding was no longer an option? What car would you drive if someone's jealousy wasn't your problem to manage? These aren't just questions, they're invitations to revolution. The kind that starts with one person refusing to pretend they're less than they are. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever hidden your success to avoid someone else's rage, leave a comment below. Share your own moment of choosing visibility over invisibility. Have you ever had a Marcus in your life? How did you overcome them? And don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear that their success doesn't need anyone's permission. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves to park their achievements proudly without apology or explanation. Thank you for joining me on this journey from hidden to visible, from targeted to triumphant. Remember, the most powerful thing you can do is succeed in spite of those who tried to stop you, and then use that success to make sure no one else has to fight the same battle alone. Until next time, drive your truth boldly, park it prominently, and never let anyone convince you to hide your shine.